So I previously did a video that dealt with suspended losses for partnerships and S corporations, and I received a great follow-up question. The question was, well, what do we do with these suspended losses? So if we have a loss that's going to be suspended because of a passive activity or basis or at-risk amount, or heck, even our net operating losses or excess business losses, what are we dealing with? How do we track those? Is it something that then goes on our financial statements? Is it something that appears on our K1? Or is it something that we do internally that the IRS does not receive? So I thought it'd be important to do a follow-up video that helps you understand what happens when you have these different suspended losses and how we're able to eventually use them. Now, if you're looking for me to go ahead and to explain what each of the suspended losses are, that's not the purpose of this video. I do have another video that addresses suspended losses, or a couple videos that actually do, because I have net operating losses on their own. But this video is the next step, and it's explaining once you determine that you have a suspended loss, how are we going to handle those actual losses? So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to show you a table, and it's going to show you which forms we use based upon the type of loss that we actually have. And we're going to see that in most of the situations, we're going to be filing this with our tax return. So the IRS is going to be aware of those suspended losses and when we use those suspended losses. So let's go ahead and look at that table. So when we're looking at suspended losses, there's really 5 different types of suspended losses that we have when we have some type of trade or business. Now, the 5 that I have here are going to be our passive activity losses, our at-risk losses, our basis limitation. We're going to have our net operating losses, and we're also going to have our excess business losses. So that's what we're looking at here. Now you can see for each of these categories, I have where it's being tracked or reported to the IRS, right? Or even internally. So the first one, when we're looking at our passive activity losses, is tracked and carried forward annually. So we're continuing to look at this. Is this something that's going to be a passive activity loss? So are we a silent partner? If we're not meeting the participation rules and we're a silent partner, we're not going to be able to take those passive activity losses and to use those passive activity losses to offset things like ordinary income. But I have that video that's going to show you how you deal with those issues. When we do have passive activity losses, what we use is our Form 8582, and we file that with our tax return, and that's how we're tracking these. And we're going to do this every single year until we eventually use these for our passive activity loss limitations. And how do we actually get to use it? Well, it's not just increasing our basis or anything, right? So the way that we're eventually going to be able to use these passive activity losses is if we start to have passive activity income, or we're no longer a passive activity, we become active, we increase our participation, or we dispose of, like selling the our interest in the business, and that's how we're going to go ahead and we're going to eventually be able to use those passive activity losses. But it is being reported on Form 8582, so that's how we're tracking them. It goes with our tax return. Our at-risk limitations, that's tracked and also carried forward annually. So we're going to continue to do this every year as we're carrying it forward. But what we're going to use for this, for our at-risk limitations, so how much are we really at risk here, we use Form 6198. So we'll be using Form 6198. That also goes with our tax return when we file our tax return. So that is another document. It's not just internal, it goes to the IRS. We have our basis limitations. Now the basis limitations is interesting because you're looking at, this usually applies to partnerships or to S corporations. If you're dealing with a partnership, then what usually happens is that's more tracked internally. It's not going to be something that's going to be tracked with the IRS. It's not a filing thing. But if we're dealing with the S corporation, then what we do is we have a basis schedule, and we go ahead and we file that basis schedule. So the basis schedule, it doesn't have to be Form 7203. A lot of software now handles those things, but you would file something like the 7203 with the return, so that is also going to be tracked. A couple other losses that are out there is the excess business loss. That's tracked and becomes a net operating loss carryover. What we're using is Form 461, and then when it becomes a net operating loss carryover, it becomes Form 172, and you can see right below the excess business loss, I have the net operating loss, and that is also tracked and carried forward annually, and that is what the Form 172 is. So all of these things are being tracked. They're being filed for the most part with your tax return, and that's how it's being tracked. So to kind of summarize the response, no, this isn't something that's going to appear on the financial statements. This does not become an asset for the business, right? Even though it's a loss that you're going to be able to use later on, we don't treat it as an asset on our financial statements, excuse me. So instead, what we're doing is we're tracking it through these different forms. All right, if this video was helpful, please remember to subscribe to this channel.